Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this, the latest in our series of webinars all about the Prevention Concordat for Better Mental Health. My name is Richard Taunt.
I'm Anna Howells.
I'm Councillor Jonathan Slater.
I'm Lily McCura.
And you're very welcome to this webinar, particularly because it's the first of our two webinars, which we've termed Viewer's Choice. We've been having a number of webinars on a range of different topics, and today's webinar is being picked by you, the viewing public, which is going to be all about the role of the voluntary sector. So, Lily, it's great to have you back. Jonathan, welcome to your first Closegate webinar. Great to have you with us.
Look forward to it.
And so, over the coming 50 minutes or so, I think we're going to have an excellent discussion. We'll say about how you can get involved in one moment. So, welcome back. If you've been to one of these webinars before, welcome if this is your first. Anna, how can people get involved?
Yep, so there's three ways you can join the conversation today, either using the question box facility on your screens, on Twitter using hashtag Prevention Concordat, or you can email us hello@kaleidoscope.healthcare.
Excellent, great. We hope this will be a two-way conversation. So please do get involved. If you're watching this on repeat, if you're watching it on YouTube, probably the Ask Question feature isn't going to be quite as useful. But by all means, still do a tweet along, and you're very welcome to send us emails afterwards. So this we might be sending you emails in the future, Jonathan.
Well, yes,
responding to future queries.
Yes, please do.
So these webinars are designed to live on. So please do get involved today. It'd be great to hear from you. Lily, I think just going to give us a bit of a rundown about what we're talking about.
Yeah, so as many people might already know, the Prevention Concordat is particularly focused on the prevention of mental health problems and the promotion of good mental health. And the difference we really want to make is to make sure that in every area across England that we've got a cross-section of partners, whether that's local authorities, communities, voluntary sector and other partners, businesses and employers, so that everybody is working together to make sure that we do more to make a difference in prevention of problems and promotion of good mental health. So that's all of our health. So what we've been doing so far, we've been obviously helped everyone think about what sort of things that you might do in your area, and by that we've been involved having a number of learning events. This is one of them. So we've been around the country from Durham, Bristol. We're off to Plymouth later on today, and actually again we've been really enthused by the amount of action that's already happening, whether that's in rural areas or in cities, where people are starting to put this into place and making it come alive. And so that's been quite interesting, again, seeing how people are applying this and coming together to make this happen.
Lovely. Lily, thanks so much. And do you want to explain that sort of array of lovely multicoloured logos we've got there on the screen as well?
Yes, so we knew right the way from the very beginning that you always need some early starters. And so we worked right the way from putting the Concordat together, and also as we go forward in the next few months and years with Public Health England, who are leading the work, but also with NHS England, Faculty for Public Health, Association of Directors for Public Health, Local Government Association, a number of voluntary sector organisations, people with lived experience, again, just as a starter for making sure that we actually had covered all of the bases that, in terms of making sure that this actually has something that, actually has some grit and is also useful. We've also made sure that this is about every age. So whether or not you're particularly interested in, children and young people, going right the way through living well and aging well, that again, this is particularly applicable. And again, we've been seeing quite a lot of appeal from employers and local authorities as well, who are already starting to think about how they may actually make a commitment themselves.
Indeed, and very much links into our topic today, all about the voluntary sector. Lily, thank you very much indeed. So as we mentioned earlier, we've been running a number of webinars in this series, where to date we've been looking across the 5 domains which were set out in the PhD planning resource for better mental health, which came out, Lily, in
August. So it's just August bank holiday weekend in last year. So we're still only 6 to 8 months in, but again, we're looking forward to doing our sort of reflections as in the next time you tune in.
Excellent. And so we've been having these discussions on these topics, but I think it's fair to say again and again what we've heard coming up is the voluntary sector, and so I think today's topic is going to span a whole range of issues we've previously touched on. As Lily said, This webinar today is part of a series of 20 face-to-face and digital learning events where we have toured the country. We're still waiting to get a bus, Lily.
Yes.
That's sort of a work in progress to get a bus. But there are still a number of events to come, both face-to-face and digital. So if you'd like to join us for those, please just go to preventionconcordat.com to register. Excellent. So I think we're going to get straight on. In terms of why we're talking about voluntary sector, again, I've said it cuts across a range of topics. But Jonathan, a great privilege to have you here today, wearing a number of hats relevant to our work. So do you want to introduce yourself and talk more about those hats?
Well, what I thought I would do is probably do three things. First, explain what a mental health champion is, what we're doing in Lewisham in terms of the council and our approach to partnership working, and then my thoughts about the role of the voluntary sector. So firstly, what's a mental health champion? Well, we have a lot of champions in our community, but my specific role is part of what's called the Mental Health Challenge. Now, this is, I believe it's actually funded by money from the Department for Health, but it's a coalition of national charities where it is hosted by the Centre for Mental Health. And I believe it was actually a Conservative who was the first mental health champion, actually a Labour politician, so mentioning a Conservative. Well, exactly for that. That's the only bipartisan comment you'll hear from me from now. But I believe he was the first champion. And as a councillor, he was able to use his position as elected member to really push for mental health, not only awareness, but to ensure that every facet, everything that the council does, not only in terms of services it delivers and its responsibilities, its statutory responsibilities and its discretionary services, but how it works with partners as well. So I became the mental health champion back in 2015. And what we've done in Lewisham is that we've given it a formal constitutional role. So we have an elected mayor, and the current mayor is Steve Bullock, who's going to be standing down in May. But he appointed me as his mental health champion, which means that I can formally report to him every quarter about what I've been working on and things that I think the local authority should be focusing on. And this has meant that I can obviously insist on officer support and time, which is really important. Because sometimes we find with some local authorities, they have champions, but it's quite a tokenistic appointment. And I think certainly that I've really tried to encourage through networks such as Labour Campaign for Mental Health, as well as through the Mental Health Challenge network, is to ensure that if you do appoint a champion, you give them a formal constitutional role so that they can actually make a difference. So there's about 100 champions at the moment. I'd love to see every local authority signed up, and certainly within the Labour Party network, I've been working with Labour Campaign for Mental Health to get every 21 London Labour Council to have a champion. I think we're nearly there, and if we do make gains in May, which I think we will do, then obviously there'll be more opportunities to have more mental health champions in the capital. So that's a bit about the champion. Now I wanted to talk a bit about what we're doing in Lewisham, because I think in Lewisham we do a very good partnership approach. So some of the things that I wanted to highlight was in terms of the Concordat and our early intervention approach, we have a good sort of work around needs and assets assessment. So we use data and intelligence, which feeds into our strategies. We launched our mental health and wellbeing strategy last year, which went out to consultation, not only to the wider community, but also to councillors, because I wanted all councillors to feel some sort of ownership of it. Again, you know, we work very closely with our clinical commissioning group, with our voluntary sector partners. And something that I wanted to talk about was obviously the work that we're doing with Thrive London. Now, for those of you who don't know what it is an initiative set up by the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, to ensure that we try and have a mental health strategy across the capital. So they've been focusing on areas. I think the Mental Health Foundation did a data analysis about where the highest rates of mental health needs were in the capital. And then they're going on to a second tranche of workshops. We're one of those. And one of the things that I've been very passionate about is that the workshop, which we're going to have on the 14th of March at the Civic Suite, is look at what they've done in Lambeth through Black Thrive. Black Thrive was set up by Councillor Jackie Dyer as a real advocacy model for those in the Black African and Afro-Caribbean community. Because what we were seeing was large mental health inequalities, particularly, you know, if you look at the proportion of those in Tier 4 services, for instance, which means that actually members of those communities weren't getting the support that they needed at an early enough stage to really help them. So we want to look at that. In Lambeth, they've set up a Black Health and Wellbeing sort of committee which reports into the Health and Wellbeing Board, and we're going to obviously hopefully get some really good ideas and try and roll it out in Lewisham, because like Lambeth, we also commission 90% of our provision through South London Mortgage Trust. So it makes sense that if we've got the same mental health trust, that we're using that. And indeed, you know, again, and as I say, other things that we're looking at, you know, is in terms of work that I'm doing. One thing I've been very passionate about is obviously the role of housing providers. So I sit on the Housing Scrutiny Committee, as well as on the board of Phoenix Community Housing. Phoenix delivers social housing in the southeast of the borough, which includes my ward in Whitefoot in North Downham. And Phoenix is called a Community Gateway Trust, so it's a tenants-led organisation. And one of the things that I came across, particularly a lot of Phoenix sort of workers were telling me, was that actually they have a lot of their tenants they know has a mental health issue, but that hasn't been diagnosed. So what we did is that we did a scrutiny investigation, which see how we could do much more better signposting. And this led to a report which was accepted by Mayor and Cabinet. And now this has led to a multi-agency working group and a kind of what's called a charter of support, so that anyone who's a housing officer who picks up an issue where it may be in hoarding, antisocial behaviour, or just generally where they feel that someone needs some support, flag it and then make the appropriate signposting to that organisation, because sometimes it could just be support in the community that could really be helpful. And the third thing I wanted to talk about was we've just been accepted as a local government association peer review. So the local government association, which represents councils nationally, and the Children's Society are looking at some sort of peer reviews about tackling particular mental health issues in the local area. And one thing I've been very worried about is the issue about our secondary school attainment, which we don't do very well in the borough, but also the rise in exclusions, and to see where, in terms of mental health and emotional support, we can really do to tackle that. We do a lot. We commission COOF to do online support in our schools. We have a Place to Be, but I think it's really important to get under the skin of the issue and find out, you know, in terms of the provision that we're delivering already, is it effective, and also finding what's causing, you know, particularly a lot of our kids in terms of showing kind of this behaviour at our schools. So those are kind of three things that I think kind of really kind of take the culture and you know, take the ambition of the Early Intervention Concordat. And finally, I'm actually going to the Public Health England doing a conference on the 27th of March at the Amber Hotel. I think they're doing a national conference, so I'm going
part of our face-to-face events.
Well, indeed. Yeah. So I'll be there. So I'll see you there as well. Finally, in terms of the role of the voluntary sector, I'm very passionate. I was just in my day job. I work for Greater London Volunteering, who represent the voluntary sector across London. And my previous day job, because as a councillor, this is my full-time job, and before that I worked at Voluntary Action Lewisham, which is the what's called the Council for Voluntary Service. So I know the real importance of the role of the voluntary sector in really working with the council in identifying support. So I mentioned about the housing initiative. The role of the voluntary sector is crucial, and Bromley Lewisham Mine do a lot of work, and they've been chairing that committee. But we also have what's called the Lewisham Mental Health Connection. So this was set up by two housing providers who specialise in supportive housing. It was Equinox and Q Vardis. So this was an independently formed group. And what this has done is meant that actually those providers and also service users can come together, network, and feedback to the council. Obviously, I've gone to some meetings, I've helped them with events, and we had a stakeholder mental health conference on the 1st of February on, actually it was Time to Talk Day. It was the importance of not only being open and tackling stigma, but also knowing where to go for support, particularly if it's at an early early level. So I think that's really important to kind of work with those really kind of key voluntary sector networks, because again, they will probably know more in terms of what's happening on the ground than say I will. Yeah. And finally, you've probably heard of Time to Change. So again, I'm happy to say that we applied to be a Time to Change hub, which is giving a platform for people who have had lived experiences to advocate on their behalf. So we're going to be we're going to be a Time for Change hub through that, and that's going to really help our advocacy model for those that have experienced or received mental health services. And I think again that's a really positive development. So overall, the role of the voluntary sector is crucial, and as I say, we really need to work in a close partnership approach. Because for me, what always comes as a startling statistic is that mental health costs the economy 105 billion because it's not dealt with at an early enough stage. We also know that I think it's majority of mental health begins under the age of 14. We also know that things like if you're a young black male, you're 6 times more likely to be sectioned under the Mental Health Act. There's all these different, we know where the evidence is, and the evidence all points to an early intervention approach. So I'm really committed to this, and I'm very excited about this initiative.
Jonathan, thank you very much. Whole host of work going on in Lewisham, and as an entirely unbiased resident, again, just proving that Lewisham is probably the best place to live in the world. Thank you for giving further evidence on that score. We'll come to questions and comments in just a second. So again, please do send us your thoughts as we go through. But Lily, I just wondered if you wanted to reflect on Jonathan's opening, but also sort of what we've been hearing as we've been touring the country about both sort of some of the opportunities, but also the challenges of working with the voluntary sector, for statutory organisations working with the voluntary sector to promote better mental health.
Yeah, so I think two things really is that I think that we have definitely seen overall a kind of an increased recognition of the role of the voluntary sector, and I think and we're fortunate, I think, that the Concordat has come at a time when there is a bit more of a mature thinking about how we best work with, support and collaborate the voluntary sector. So that's not simply about voluntary sector could do this for nothing. This is about, sometimes it's about commissioning, some tailored interventions. Sometimes it is actually though working with the assets and links that some community sector organisations have with particular communities. So that may be small organisations that may hit just a very small community or patch. It might be a village or a small network, or including sort of faith communities. Or it might be something larger where it's, for example, we're doing some, starting to do some work with the Citizens Advice Bureau and others to look at, again, that how can you do something at scale that once you've sort of modelled it, it could happen in all those different settings. I think we're also it's quite an interesting time, because on that sort of that principle of the mental health, particularly prevention, has really got cross-party support, and I think we've got a very mature attitude both in Lewisham and also in London that's very visible. But I'm really keen to make sure as well that we make the most of this year in particular, both locally and nationally, that we've got our first Minister for Mental Health and Inequalities, Jackie Doyle-Price. So again, there's potential for us to think about how we make the most of that at a national level, but also again for the voluntary sector to be kind of almost pitching their offer of examples of case studies. So I've already seen case studies that I'll be sort of flagging up, but in some of our resources, which are again about some very small things where again you've got examples of what used to be things like Sure Start or Triple P that have been adapted so that they are better able to support families in the sort of second generation of having had a problem. So you're starting to stop it happening again, or where you're again looking at people where they've got debt problems, and actually how do you intervene more early with that, and also that the notion of family support. I did actually also want to, before I hand back over, just also flag up that bit about the role of the champions, because again is that I think that is taking, you've got that again really strong example of making an elected member a constitutional role, but even if where they're not, every single mental health champion that I've come across actually has been going over and above. So actually they are also volunteers in a sense, as well as doing their sort of formal role that they've been elected to do. So again, I think that again we've got a massive asset, and I want to see how much more we can also do more about that with you, about the asset, that the champions as assets in different settings as well.
Lovely. Lily, thanks very much. Let's just remind people just how you can get involved today. Anna?
Yeah, 3 ways you can join the conversation, either using the chat box facility on your screens, via Twitter using #PreventionConcordat, or email us hello@kaleidoscope.healthcare.
And again, if you're watching after the event, please do still use the second and the third of those, and probably less the first. But all comments very much welcome as we go through. So please do send things in. I might just use my chair's prerogative just to kick us off, if that's okay. Where what's really striking, Jonathan, hearing you talk is, once again, we talked about this on previous webinars, it's just the breadth of action required to promote better mental health across the area, going across from housing into community groups, into schools. Yeah. I don't know if you know the number, but I imagine just within Lewisham you have got dozens, if not hundreds, of voluntary groups working across Lewisham with a role to play.
I think at the last count we had about 800 charities in the borough from the last count. But again, I mean, not to be too political though, it does feel the tidal wave though of need at the moment, and it has to be said that austerity hasn't helped. In fact, we're seeing mental health trends going completely the wrong way. So that's why I think in Lewisham we've always had that close partnership with our community, but we are having to deal with the fact that the council's lost 60% funding. We're having to make very difficult decisions. So, I do think we should always try and, obviously set the scene where we are nationally, and see what the uncertainties of leaving the European Union as well, and the changes in benefits. And we have seen, and as a councillor, I've seen more people coming into my surgery with mental health needs, and that's why I got mental health first aid training delivered for councillors, because it was delivered to council staff as well. And I think that kind of training is really important for all kind of practitioners in the front line, because it gives you I'm not saying you have to be like a trained psychologist. I'm not a trained psychologist, but it just gives you a bit more awareness of certain conditions, what to look for, and then what you can do to help that person. And then also about looking after your own mental health. I think people who work in public services, particularly at local level, are finding it quite challenging at the moment. I think we've also got to think of people who are actually working in the field about their mental health as well. So again, I kind of don't want to be too political, but I do think it has led to obviously a lot of challenging situations. We had an issue with our child and adolescent mental health services where we didn't go ahead with our planned reductions because it was highlighted that demand was escalating, not at the point of assessment, but at the point of actually being of referral. So we were having a second waiting list being created with our child and adolescent mental health services. And of course, you want to kind of, we supported and adopted what's called the choice partnership approach, which again is an early intervention model where we're trying to see all young people, particularly at a stage where sometimes they don't need clinical support, maybe they need sort of appropriate signposting or other support. But again, we are still seeing that demand going up again. So I think we've just got to also temper the fact that early intervention is great, but we're working in a sort of environment where it demands, where mental health needs are going up quite a lot because of a lot of external factors.
And that point about the challenging context, very well made, and well made across a number of our events. Probably for the record, we should say other political parties are available, and the Mental Health Champion Scheme does it's
cross-party. So as I said to you, first champion was a Conservative.
Excellent. But so going back to that point, okay, you've got 800 charities working across Lewisham. Great to get your view, Jonathan, and then go to Lily. What have you been doing in Lewisham about how you can work across such a breadth? If you to spend a day working with each group, then you spend 2.5 years.
I mean, we commission. We have a main grants program in the borough, so we do fund a lot of organisations, not only frontline organisations, but what are called second tier. So they give support to charities. So we fund, Voluntary Action Lewisham, who are the umbrella organisation, because as I say, it's to try and talk to 800 separate charities would just be nearly impossible, and also using those kind of like networks. So as I mentioned earlier, the Lewisham Mental Health Connection. If I needed to go and just do a deep dive or to talk to the voluntary sector, and I got officers to work with the connection to when we did our health and wellbeing strategy to make sure that not only were they involved in discussions, but actually our public health team actually went and spoke to them, because it's important. And I work in the voluntary sector, I know this, being part of the conversation at the beginning is so much more effective than just being consulted at the end, because actually when you do make policy or you develop commissioning, it's when it's having those conversations right at the beginning rather than it just being an afterthought at the end. And also we have quite what's called ward assemblies. I don't know if you've been to your local ward assembly yourself.
I haven't. No.
I would encourage you to do that. So we give devolved money to each of our 18 ward assemblies, so that the total budget at the moment is £15,000. So 2,500 that is a discretionary fund for councillors if you want to, but it's decided by local residents what kind of money they want to fund as well. So that's a really good way. Also, charity is really kind of telling local residents what they're doing in the local community and their projects. And I'd say to anyone who lives in Lewisham, please do get involved in your ward assembly. It's a great initiative, and it means that actually it gives you kind of control over what's being delivered in your local area as well.
We could just have a tangent now and just spend the next half an hour talking just about Lewisham.
It
probably work for us, probably less well for others. Really nicely put about sort of translating it down to that micro level, Jonathan. Lily, we've talked before about the need for sort of partnership working across an area. When you have such a breadth of groups, so what advice would you be giving to both to local authorities but also to voluntary groups about how best actually to work together for better mental health outcomes?
So, I mean, every local area will have a health and wellbeing board, and I think that is usually quite a good place to start if you're not connected already. So again, ideally, you would already be connected through your sort of local VCSE alliance or support organisation, but if not, health and wellbeing board's a good start point. And knowing their priorities. Now, actually, I found that most everywhere across the country, a lot have either got mental health either as explicitly in their top 3, or if you think about it, mental health is in there. Whether it's on the cleaner, greener borough agenda or it's on the community safety agenda, that's also mental health. But we are kind of talking about kind of making people feel safe and wanting to live and grow up in the places that they live. And so again, that's kind of good way to get a sense of what the local priorities are where, and then what your offer might be. And then if you're then going down the, looking at almost doing a pitch, for want of a better language, or promoting your intervention, then using things like the Public Health England Joint Strategic Needs Assessment tool and others, so you can actually pull together the data, so you can look at how what you're offering matches what your local area's data is telling them. So again, there's if you've got something that really works particularly well for young people who are excluded, or again, I've mentioned debt already, that for example, if those are the issues that are coming up in that area, then you really want to be sort of making a point of that. We also have some tools which are particularly also usable by the voluntary sector, which are about return on investment. So again, I've heard when I was in the Northwest, Salford were telling me about how a lot of their organisations are finding that tool actually almost writes their business case for them, as to how they might put something together. And again, as I say, it's not always about necessarily going for money, as I say, but it is also about actually what assets might the local authority being able to facilitate you with, which might be again just about sort of reinforcing the value of your work and offering you somewhere to deliver from, as well as funding. Then I think also the third one as well is about partnership. Is that I think very few organisations can do something on their own. So again, whether or not you're thinking you're a school or a school governor, and that you might want to link in with the the sort of local community group, which might be about again, it might be about sort of gardening. Now these are all you're seeing how my mind works really a bit here, but actually it's the putting the jigsaw together based on what the local area's needs and assets are, what we need to what the area's agreed that it wants to change, and where can your offer or come in, and that also meets your goals. So again, for example, if you're at school, you're obviously wanting your young people to be attaining well, growing and thriving. But again, what else? What can this bring to the mental health agenda? And I've actually recently also been doing some work with some of the other bigger organisations. So like Coaches UK, for example, again, which is both for professional coaches in terms of those who are paid, but also volunteers. So again, we are wanting to make sure that they also understand more about how mental health fits into physical activity and vice versa. So the key there being is that actually, if you are going to also go down the road of thinking what might you do a little bit more about mental health, start to learn a little bit about your facts and the knowledge. And so things like the mental health first aid or Connect 5 or a combination of those two. And again, let's start to get yourself, sort of your staff equipped with that information. And a lot of those courses are either free or again, because we're increasing the number of places that are available locally. And also, and you might even want to volunteer to be a trainer. And we encourage you we want to increase the number of those people who are available in communities to do that and offer that for free as well. So again, there's a lot of number of routes in there, dependent on whether you're starting with an intervention offer or actually you're starting from being an individual that's got a particular interest and you want to link yourself into what else is going on in your area.
Lily, thank you very much. I'm mentioning a lot of the Prevention Concordat resources there. Lily, if people haven't got hold of them before, how can they?
So there are two ways of going through. You can either go the straightforward way, or the dry way, which is go into .gov.uk, into the Public Health England website and type in Prevention Concordat for better mental health. Or the quickest way is actually Google Prevention Concordat, and actually it comes up right at the top of the page.
I would love to know. Everyone watching, which is the route they're going today?
And I use the Google route, actually. I have to say that.
That's how you found this place.
Yes, it takes you straight in, gives you all the products in order, and again you can choose which one you want to start with again, and and have a bit of a route around. Also, as well, importantly, let us know if there's anything else that isn't there that you'd like to see policy. So again, we're given ideas of what things work in different areas. Again, things about knowing your assets and the local profile. But again, we are really up for working with you to develop a bit more that helps make this land well.
Thank you.
One thing I think is really important though is to mention about the role of volunteers is how do you empower them? And I think certainly the feeling that they're not just there as an extended arm of the state, that they're actually as independent, motivated individuals who are appreciated for what they do, and also that they have a voice in how mental health services get delivered. Because I do think, and this was the problem with the big societies, that it was seen as effectively kind of just replacing what was done in the public sector to just giving out to volunteers or to private sector organisations. And I think it's about the fact is that the voluntary sector is the community, and it's just working effectively with community organisations who kind of like, a bit like that beer advert once said, can reach the parts that other services can't reach. But I think volunteers need to also be respected and appreciated. And I do worry that, if we put too much sometimes on volunteers, you're going to get volunteer fatigue where they themselves will get exhausted. So I think it's just finding the right balance where actually they are the ones that can pick up an issue and they can make an appropriate referral, whether it be if it could be to someone who's lonely, to a peer group, or maybe they need more sort of clinical support. So I think again, it's just getting your approach right, and the way you work with the voluntary sector should be done, in terms of parity of esteem, in terms of seen as an equal partner, rather than just seeing them as a sub partner to what you're trying to do.
Yes, really nicely made. Other bids are available other than the ones we're referencing. But your point that this sort of parity of esteem really nicely linked in. So the alignment between different voluntary groups equally extends to alignment between different statutory groups. And I can well imagine that if you're a voluntary organisation hearing different things from different statutory bodies who supposedly are working together, can be a pretty frustrating endeavour.
Sure. Well, you can thank the NHS Act for that, can't you? Andrew Lawsley.
Other political parties are available. Anna, we've got questions coming through.
We do. Thank you, David, for this question. Very much following on from our discussion just now. David asks, is there a cultural gap between local government and the community and voluntary sector? He gives the example of local government might be seen as rule-bound and target-driven, whereas the voluntary sector could be seen as organic and long-term. And if there is this divide, how can it be overcome?
Lovely question. Thank you, David. Johnson, do you want to start? And then it'd be great to get Lily to you.
Well, again, I think that's a very good point, because again, I think it comes back to an earlier point that I made about the voluntary sector being part of the conversation at the beginning when it comes to funding, whether it's giving out grants, commissioning, and I think this should apply to all statutory agencies, including councils and our NHS partners, because again, I think we've seen, unfortunately, something like the WEP programme where actually if you don't speak to the right people at the beginning, you get a commissioning model that actually doesn't actually deliver the outcomes, and you actually get perverse incentives where you're just going for those that don't need the help while you're missing out those that really do need the help. So I think for the voluntary sector, for anything that the council and we have a compact which was set up under the last Labour government, which was kept by the coalition, and we have a Lewisham Compact where we are committed to working with the voluntary sector as an equal partner when it comes to developing policy and commissioning. And certainly when we have a new mayor and we've just appointed a new chief executive, I'm sure that will continue after the local elections. But a way to get over those barriers is for the voluntary sector to be part of the conversation at the beginning. So you don't create a commissioning model that's going to put off smaller groups bidding for particular contracts or for grants.
Jonathan, thanks very much. And Lily, turn to you. Great to get your view, both reflecting on your national experience, but also your range of experience across local authorities as well.
Yeah, so I've worked in 4 different local authorities and 3 charities actually. So, and I think that I actually just sort of wrote down 3 C's there, and I think that the closing that gap of the sort of stereotype of local authorities being sort of moribund or slow in acting versus a local voluntary sector is actually, I think that the interface is that, actually in both you often have, some very creative people, people are very committed to their communities and what do the communities want, what are they trying to achieve. Many people who've gone into either work or serve local government are thinking about that. So that's where the opportunities, I think, as well. And so actually you might find that, you know, so an example I was thinking again, actually this again was the Northwest, where they were talking about, you know, to local authority and the NHS were really wanting to kind of get their older people, particularly, you know, reducing social isolation, worked with the local community groups, and actually they kind of did, there was a little bit brokering went on very, you know, creatively, and then we're then thinking about, you know, it wasn't completely let's replace Meals on Wheels, but actually what they then did was, you know, Meals on Wheels, instead of being delivered in people's homes individually, was actually delivered in community groups with age concern, that you then actually got volunteers involved in going to collect people from the houses, sometimes actually just crossing the road, even just, you know, kind of like a bit of physical activity, a bit of, and then actually some social interaction, you know, again, that actually then went on to involve a local sort of community dance group and various other sorts of things. So again, by bringing those people together, everybody's aims and goals were met, and actually had something that was quite useful and innovative and actually replicable as well. So again, I think it's that applying what is it you're trying to achieve, and then bringing the best of all of those people around to actually think of some ideas as to how it might work with the money that's available, and using some money as well in there as well.
I mean, another useful organisation is Health Watch, because again, Health Watch have a role in a sense of representing service users, and they also have actually places on the Health and Wellbeing Board. So again, if someone wants to get active, then again another avenue is to go and volunteer for your local Health Watch, and then who knows, you know, and then there might be even an opportunity to sit on the main Health and Wellbeing Board, because they under the current NHS structure, there actually are allocated places on the Health and Wellbeing Board, and I believe the CVS Voluntary Action Solution also has a place on the Health and Wellbeing Board. But I think again it comes back to the old sort of thing about having those, you know, joint agency strategic boards, but making sure that kind of gets filtered down to the front line. Because what I've seen a lot when I was a local government officer, and I worked in the cabinet office when I oversaw the National Compact, is that you can have all the policies in the world, but if frontline staff aren't actually adhering to what's agreed at the top, then things ain't going to happen. And that's why I use the example of housing, where you know, what I hope to do with this charter isn't just a sort of grand statement of, well, yes, we're committed to this, but it's to ensure that there's a mechanism for housing officers in the field where they've got an easy way of reporting an issue and it getting referred back, and someone gets the support that they need at an early enough point in their when they need it.
So you can have a bit of grand statement, but linking it to actual
exactly,
action.
And it's how you do that. It's that kind of what I think people call the golden thread between that high end strategy and how that kind of feeds down to the front line.
Indeed, and we've actually, one of our webinars coming up, it's all about that, exactly that point about translating need into deliverable commitments, which is on the something of March, Anna.
It is. 23rd?
23rd of March, there we go. I hope you can join for that one. Anna, further questions?
Yeah, I have a quick question. Jonathan, you mentioned earlier the importance of network working between different voluntary organisations. And I just wondered if you could expand a little on that, and whether you had any kind of really good examples of where voluntary organisations have come together and kind of worked strategically.
Well, I think the Lewisham Mental Health Connection is a very good example. The reason I give that example is that actually they kind of set themselves up.
Okay.
It wasn't the council coming to the voluntary saying, well, we think that we need a network around mental health. It's something that kind of had, that they themselves saw there was a need, because we do have, as I say, voluntary sector forums and networks, but nothing specifically around mental health. So they were set up, I believe, back in 2012 by Equinox and Kew Vardis. Unfortunately, a couple of years ago, Equinox and Kew Vardis decided not to fund the organisation, but it's now being supported by Community Connections, by someone called Trevor Pipers, who's based at the council, and they're an Age UK-led sort of forum network who do a lot of support in the community as well. And what Trevor's been very good at is to get the network to meet, to hold conferences, and we actually had an event on World Mental Health Day, which again was looking at some of those issues about how we as a local authority can work better with our community organisations. So my advice would be, you know, to charities in other parts of the UK, is that actually sometimes I think it's best if you think there's a need, then just set it up yourself. And then if you get that sign up among your peers, but obviously the local authority will have to recognise that and kind of work for you. And I think actually for a lot of councils, I mean, we talked about the culture of councils. I mean, I worked in authorities before the cuts, and yeah, you could argue there's obviously bureaucracy, siloed working, and things like that. I'm not going to tell you which council in particular. I wouldn't say it wasn't Lewisham, but it wasn't Lewisham. But the problem is that councils in Lewisham, we have 50% less staff than what we had in 2010. So we've gone from 4,000 staff members to 2,000. And as I said before, not to get too political here, you know, we've lost 60% of funding. Local, as the National Audit Office said, councils are really hitting the thread with burn. So in terms of capacity of what councils can actually do, there has to also be an honest conversation with people in the community to say that what councils could do 10 years ago, probably, you know, in terms of additional provision on top of their statutory obligations, which is child and adult social care, as well as, you know, cleaning the, you know, picking up the rubbish. It's a very challenging economic environment. So again, I think that would probably also bring, you know, councils even more the need to work with the community, even more so than probably what they've done before. But I think, you know, if you are a community activist, if you do, you know, work in a mental health charity and you feel that your voice isn't being heard, there's Health Watch as an example. But I think the best thing is just set something up yourself, and then once you've got that sign up, then I'm sure the council will be more than willing to have those conversations with you.
Awesome, thanks very much. And Lily, would you like to build on that in terms of voluntary groups not waiting for local authorities?
Oh, absolutely. I definitely believe in that. You know, if it's that classic thing. If you're waiting for someone to tell you to start, the answer's now. Just start. Get going now. And I just was thinking again, reflecting a bit really, which was about the, you know, the notion of community. So obviously we're really clear that actually, you know, this change and must, you know, impact on local communities, where and all the different permutations of those, but also within communities, and it affects different areas differently. Is that it's also businesses are around in medical. So again, some areas are very fortunate and they have some very thriving businesses. Within that are employees, and some organisations have some very good, you know, promote volunteering. I mean, particularly a lot of the national organisations, but some of the smaller ones as well. And so that might be another thing as well, which is about, you know, kind of using or pulling out an asset that is available on the patch in order to help support and enliven and keep, you know, invigorate some of the activity that's happening. So again, I think it's also encourage people to think that way as well.
Lovely, great. Anna, further questions?
Nope.
Great. Well, just one final one for me, and then it would be good to possibly go around and just get some final reflections before we close. Time's against us as always, which is Lily, Jonathan, really interested in your views on how different areas can learn from each other. So, Jonathan, it's been great hearing about what's going on in Lewisham. I'd be really interested if there are other boroughs you've looked at in terms of how they're working on promotion of better mental health, or particularly the voluntary organisation aspect, and how actually you can promote more learning between boroughs. You're talking about Thrive London, and then Lily, sort of building on sort of how can areas across the country best link up and share approaches. But Jonathan, do you want to start?
Well, I was going to say, I mean, for me, the Black Thrive in Lambeth, I think it's been an incredible initiative, and in Lewisham we do fund organisations like Family Health ISIS who give out advocacy to the Black African and Caribbean community when it comes to mental health support. But I think something in Lambeth, their model has given a real voice to that community, and it's done through a way that's bottom up. So it's not tokenistic, it's actually genuine, and it's led to a formal structure. We have a Black and Wellbeing committee that reports directly to Health and Wellbeing Board. So for me, that's a really good example of how, talking to my opposite number, Councillor Ed Davey and Jackie Dyer in Lambeth, they actually came and did a session with our Health and Wellbeing Board last before Christmas. So all the agencies heard, and that's what led us to say, well, actually, we're going to get a Thrive London workshop. Let's focus on this particular area, because it's an issue that actually the South London Multi Trust also brought to my attention as well. And I think the Thrive London network is very good because one thing that I was speaking to in terms of the Mayor of London's team was that to get the mental health champions as part of that network, so that actually we can actually hear from other boroughs. And also we can bring that political pressure to bear to say that actually things which we feel aren't, you know, as good as it could be, then we can learn from examples. And particularly for London, it's very, you know, it helps me to say somewhere like Lambeth, which is very similar to Lewisham, say, well, in Lambeth they've done this, why can't we do this in Lewisham? Yeah. And I think having those examples of local areas which are very similar in demographics and in location does give you that extra kind of evidence to go to your NHS partners, to your own staff, your own council, to your own community, to say, look, I think we can do better in this area.
Really nice example, thanks. Lily?
Well, maybe best for last, but in terms of things that I've got to say, but over the next year, we are now going to be working with the Association for Mental Health Providers to do a year-long piece of work on actually how can we, gather together some case studies of what's been happening in the voluntary sector and share them in a way that allows people to, kind of look at, actually I could transfer this bit, and that might be the content, or it might be the approach of how we're working. So we are going to be, one of the first stops will of course be Lambeth, Southwark and Lewisham, I think as well. We're going to do 3 of those, but also again, as I said, I've mentioned places like Salford, like Wigan, and Gateshead and other places where we already know that they've been doing some great work, and we want to pull those together. So that will show that in terms of topics, whether that's age or a particular issue, like as I say, like debt is very prominent at the theme at the moment, or about demographics, or about some of the statistical neighbours, because again, some of it might be, for example, if you're in an area where you want to do a lot more on, say, for example, the prevention of suicide, again, we'll be able to match examples from that and pull that together. So that you'll see from April a rapid number of examples of those starting to come up, and we'll be sharing those with you both online and then also through events that we hope to be planning throughout the year.
Fantastic, Lily, that sounds great. And if people are interested in finding out more about that, what's the way to do that?
So for now, I think because we still have a number of webinars to go, so I think keep tuning into the webinars for a start. Also keep engaging with the Prevention Concordat face-to-face events, and then we'll also be setting up the online and continuing we're working on this online platform to see how we can continue being able to share that either through the preventionconcordat.gov.uk site or through the Association of Mental Health Providers and the Health and Wellbeing Alliance.
Lily, thank you very much indeed. So we're almost out of time. So I will ask my fellow panelists here if they could just think about sort of one key reflection from our discussion. Thanks all for joining the discussion. I think it's been really, really constructive. So one quick reflection from the session. I will start just to buy everyone else frantic time to think. But if I start, and then go Anna, then Jonathan, then Lily. So one reflection from our session, and the point I'd like to pick up, Jonathan, just your phrasing about the need for parity of esteem between voluntary sector and statutory sector, and how both sides can go into this relationship, seeing them see each other as equals, and a whole range of things which that leads on to in terms of respect and joint working, and how we have a really constructive relationship. Anna.
Thanks. So my key point is probably that or the importance of involving the voluntary sector at the beginning of conversations, as Jonathan said, to make sure that their voices are heard in kind of any commissioning process going forward.
Lovely, lovely waiting to the end. Jonathan.
I think for me, it's just if you're if you're active in your community, you want to do something around mental health, then please do get involved. Get involved in being involved in a charity. Contact your local health watch. Even join the Labour Party and stand as a councillor if that's what you want to do, because I think we are seeing the mental health going up a lot. I mean, we can see it our own eyes. The fact that homelessness is going up. It's we're having a lot of pressures at the moment where we are seeing the mental health demands going through the roof, and I think what we need to do is work closer together as a community now, probably, and I think we now to work in partnership, not only because it's a good and effective thing to do, but I think it's probably needed now more than at any time in the last 10 or 20 years. So again, just get involved and just get your voice heard. Other political parties are available. Really.
I mean, I would of course say that this is absolutely about making sure that we're working in partnership and collaboration, and I think I would add to that really the beauty of sort of the involving the voluntary sector, again that's between different voluntary sector organisations as well as with the local authority and the NHS and employers, is that we just got real opportunity here to be quite creative in terms of what we put together. So, and again that also means as well the thing that we haven't mentioned so far, which is about being really timely and getting change to happen quite quickly, as well as being there in the long term.
Lee, Jonathan, thank you very much indeed. Thanks to everyone who's joined. Let's just remind you in terms of upcoming events. As Lee said, we're in Plymouth tomorrow, and then Birmingham, London, Liverpool and Cambridge. We've also got a range of webinars coming up. Next couple of webinars, Anna?
Yeah, we've got one next week. It's our second Viewers' Choice webinar, and the topic is blue lights. And the one after that is translating need into deliverable commitments on the 23rd.
and then we're going to be back in June. Our final webinar will be reflecting on the whole series of face-to-face and digital learning events. So we hope you can join us for those. Thanks again for joining. Hope to see you again. Thanks.
Thank you. Bye-bye.